Hello and welcome to a brand new Arseblog Arsecast right here on arseblog.com. How are you? Hope you're well. Thank you very much indeed, as always, for being here. What we have for you today is a post-Champions League discussion, if we can get that much out of last night's 0-0 draw with Atalanta in Italy. Not exactly the most exciting game you'll ever see, but it did have one big moment. Of course, when David Raya saved that penalty from Matteo Retegui, not just saved the penalty, but got up and clawed away the rebound, which looked like it was going in. It nearly did, but Raya, as he has been this season so far, was very important for Arsenal. And I think you could see, of course, that we did miss in a game like this, where it's very tight. You just need a moment to open up the opposition. We missed the vision and the creativity and the craft of Martin Odegaard in midfield. But it is what it is. We're going to have to find ways to make chances and score goals and win games without him for a few weeks at least, because that is the update on his injury. Anyway, we'll get on with the show. And with me to talk about last night's game is Phil Costa. Hello, Phil.
Morning, Andrew. How are we doing?
We're doing all right. I'm just trying to come to terms with how we're going to frame a discussion around an enthralling, exciting, end-to-end, action-packed adventure like last night.
Can you insert cricket sounds here or something?
Yeah.
Or a tumbleweed flashing by?
I can do the crickets, no problem. There we go.
Yeah. Not great. Not great, was it? And I think even around the 30th minute, I said, can we just simulate to full time and be done with this? Because it felt very much like, without really saying it, both teams were kind of happy with a point.
It's weird, isn't it, to try and, like, I in the old Champions League format, I understood what a point meant away from home. In a inverted commas, group stage game, not the end of the world to go away, come back with a point, you've got the home leg. But I'm slightly in the dark really now as to what this actually means in the grand scheme of things. Like, do we have to recalibrate our opinions or what we know about Champions League football with this new format where it's the top 8 qualify, the next 8 go through to like an extra game, and you have this like huge league table which looks absolutely absurd. I don't think we have really a frame of reference to properly understand what a draw means. And maybe that was evident in the way the two teams played, in that they cancelled each other out a bit, neither team really wanting to lose it by virtue of trying to win it. So it's sort of strange in that context as well.
Yeah, it was weird, but I think if you can't find a context around the new format, you can find a context around your own fixtures. And I think Arsenal will have seen this game sandwiched between two horrible away games, obviously this being away as well. And their intention is always to go out on the pitch and win, right? We know this. Arteta wouldn't settle for anything less. A lot of those players wouldn't settle for anything less. But there has to be a context in which you can put this game and say, look, we've just played Spurs, difficult away game, draining emotionally, draining physically. We've had to travel to Bergamo on a Thursday, play another game. They're no mugs. This is a good team that we're playing. And then again, with an eye on Man City on the weekend, which is probably the hardest away game we're going to have this season. There's a way you can contextualize that. And then I think heading towards the rest of the Champions League campaign, we've got some favourable home fixtures, maybe, in which you would think that's where we can accumulate points. And I think yesterday was mostly dealing with what we've got in terms of injuries, in terms of bringing players back into the fold, maybe giving some a rest, and seeing what shape you're in ahead of Sunday. So it did feel a bit like we weren't all in, if that makes sense. Although I know that Arteta wouldn't have framed it that way. I think there's just a subconscious part of your mind where you think, we've got Man City to play on Sunday. Let's keep something in the tank.
Yeah, maybe so. I think, like you say, the way Arteta would have framed it, he would want to win the game, and I'm sure the players who are out there would want to win the game. But what you what your plan is before a game can often be waylaid by the way the game actually pans out, the way that the two teams play each other, the way they set up against each other. We'll come to that in a moment, but he did make a couple of changes. Obviously, Declan Rice came back in, not unexpected. Jorginho was the guy to drop out. And Gabriel Jesus in for Leandro Trossard up front. On any level, two very decent replacements. I wasn't necessarily expecting him to do a great deal more than that, although I did think, maybe one of your wide players, you could start a Raheem Sterling in a game like this, particularly in the context of, what's coming up this weekend. But again, I suppose when you look at the players who might have come into certain positions, Calafiori injured during international duty, only just coming back, only just starting his career. Sterling, didn't play for the first few weeks of the season. So again, sort of getting him up to speed physically. So there's some sort of, you can understand why maybe there wasn't a bit more change.
Completely. You kind of ran through some of the options there. There's not a huge amount he could have done. I think obviously Jesus coming in was a sensible change, an obvious one, I think, especially with us needing to be a little bit creative over the next few weeks without Martin Odegaard. I think it's nice to get a gauge and just to look at these players, really. It's been so frustrating for Jesus because he's always on, off, stop, start. He doesn't give himself a chance to really pull up a run of games or get some momentum in those legs, because every time he does and he looks close, how often we'll be speaking about, he's looked sharp in pre-season, he's scoring goals, and then he's out for a couple of weeks with a knee injury. And that just feels like his Arsenal career after the World Cup, basically. So yeah, I thought the changes were expected. Rice came in again. I thought maybe Arteta would have been tempted to start Calafiori, but again, we don't know his exact condition, whether he was ready enough for 70 or 90 minutes. I thought he looked good when he came on, actually. Yeah. There were some nice touches, a nice few bursts in field. You can see that he's such a physical, proactive presence on the team. And I think having a right footer initially in Timber and then having a left footer in Calafiori shows you the difference a little bit between those natural mechanics and optics.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that a bit later on, because look, I really liked Jurrien Timber. I thought he was great in the derby. I think, we're beginning to see a player who is getting up to something akin to the level of match fitness that he would like and that Arsenal would like after that ACL injury. But I have a sort of nagging feeling that he's slightly inhibited when he plays at left back, because not just because of, being a right-footed player playing out there. I just don't know if the angles open up for him in many ways. He did seem to play a little bit differently than Calafiori, or Calafiori played it a little bit differently to Jurrien Timber. And look, you always, these days, you kind of have to frame every discussion by saying, if I say I prefer this, it doesn't mean I hate that. But sort of in the back of my mind, when I'm thinking about the way this team is setting up, maybe a bit later in the season, maybe, fingers crossed when everybody is fit, maybe when we've got potentially our first choice midfield going, that Calafiori as the left back, or playing that role that the left back is asked to do in this team, it feels a bit more natural to me in terms of what we want to get from that player. Not just sort of replicating what Zinchenko did for 18 months, right? Because I think that, not that it's old hat, but I think people and other teams and analysts have come to terms with that. So you need something a little bit different. I think stylistically, obviously Calafiori and Zinchenko are quite different players in terms of how they progress the ball and everything else. So I was encouraged, actually. I know we're getting right to the end of the game, the last 15 minutes or so, but I was encouraged to see Calafiori come on and not just sort of, he got 15 minutes and didn't do anything wrong. There were things I looked at and went, oh, yeah, I like that.
Definitely. And I think in a performance where Arsenal looked a bit stodgy, a bit stiff, particularly down the left-hand side, we had Jurrien Timber, a right-footed player playing at left back. We had Declan Rice as the left 8, a right-footed player playing on the left side. Martinelli, another right-footed player playing on the left side. So naturally, their instincts are more centered around coming inside. So again, there's just a weird situation on the left now where we've obviously been unlucky with the Marino injury. We've been unlucky with Calafiori, but the balance and the chemistry and the relationships are just not there at the moment. So it was definitely a welcome surprise, or not a welcome surprise, a welcome addition to the team late on, I think, with Calafiori, because he just gives you a bit of punch, a bit of play in that area. And he's really noticeable on the pitch. Like, I don't think he's capable of having a quiet game or just getting through a game with a 7 out of 10 performance.
Sure.
He's always doing something, whether that's steaming into a challenge, driving forward with the ball. So little things. We're picking up players along the way now that we've maybe missed during the early parts of the season that should hopefully give us a few options moving forward, because I think, based on injuries, based on suspensions, based on a couple of other bits and pieces, we are not at our best at the moment. And especially now with the Odegaard injury, we're going to have to figure some things out. So we need as many players as possible to choose from that can give us different things,
Sure, absolutely. So, look, the first part of the game, I think Arsenal did okay. Played pretty well, and then Atalanta got a foothold into it, and they played pretty well. We had a couple of chances in the first half. One was a Bukayo Saka free kick, which I was curious about.
It was a good save, actually.
I thought it was a really good save because I was curious about what way Saka was going to take it, because we don't score a lot of free kicks, Phil. I think the last one we scored was years ago, Martin Odegaard against Burnley. Is that the last? It
was against Burnley, yeah.
Direct free kick we scored, so that's quite a long time ago. So we've a bit of a deficit there in terms of who takes them and who you might feel is a bit of a threat there. So we haven't really seen Bukayo Saka take too many free kicks. So that was something, at least. It was a good save from the goalkeeper. I think he got down well to save from Partey on the rebound. I'm not sure if Partey was offside or if the ball just went back out off him. There was one for Martinelli as well, which he sort of clipped over the bar, one of those where he cut inside and wasn't quite over the ball to take the shot. But, after that, the first half really felt like two teams either cancelling each other out or holding each other at arm's length. We found their system very difficult to play through. We couldn't get through the lines. We couldn't progress the ball either in central areas or wide areas because there was always a man there. Part of that, I think, as well was, in the first half in particular, they seemed to have an extra man on the right-hand side. Like they play the ball out to the right and you go, oh, there's the guy. And then they're playing another pass and you're like, whoa, where'd that guy come from? And all of a sudden you're having to shift men over, which means that when you do get the ball back, you don't have the ability to stretch the pitch and get the ball quickly into either the wide forwards or into the central areas. So it was quite attritional, wasn't it? Both sides holding each other at bay, no real chances at either end, and it didn't necessarily make for particularly exciting viewing. It wasn't a lot of fun.
No, it wasn't. And I said it earlier, but Atalanta are no mugs. I think obviously Gianluca Scamacca and Giorgio Scalvini are two very big misses for them, both out with ACLs at the moment, and they lost a big player in Koopmeiners to Juventus this summer. But they're a hard-running, physical team who are obviously still dangerous, especially up front. They have Retegui, De Ketelaere, Ademola Lookman, and they have a really good home record. I mean, what Gasperini is managing to do and continues to do with that team is ridiculous, really. I mean, he's working miracles with this group. And you're absolutely right. In that first half, anytime we got the ball in the wide areas, there was two players already. Before Saka could even control the ball, before Martinelli could even control the ball, there was Jim City and Costa on the right, and then Kolasinac and Ruggieri on the left. So they completely closed those areas up. There was no space for us to operate in 1v1 situations, and that naturally meant that the ball's coming back inside. So they really did a good job of closing any avenue that we tried to work around, which meant David Raya was going long. How many times in that first 20, 25, even half an hour did Raya launch the ball, and it was Declan Rice looking to make those supporting runs from midfield, or Kai Havertz being the target, because there was no way for us to progress on the ground. And even that they figured out. Their central defender in the middle was quite dominant aerially, so we really couldn't find a way to get through this team. And it didn't surprise me at all. I think, as I said, they're a very good team, especially strong at home. And it just felt a bit stodgy. And naturally, our eyes go to the absences and who's not there, and we've missed Martin Odegaard already. And I think it's a very small sample size, Spurs away and Atalanta away. I'm not ready to make any glaring conclusions.
Sure.
And I think we've struggled away from home in Europe with Odegaard in the team anyway.
Yeah.
So it's still too small a sample size to make any huge conclusions. But there were a couple of times where I thought when we needed somebody to play a final ball, the final ball wasn't right. There was one in particular where I think it might have been Rice.
Yes.
We had a 2-on-1 situation after they gave it away around the halfway line. And he just passed the ball so early to Jesus, and he didn't have a chance to get into his stride, and the ball kind of bounced off the back of his heel. And, it was either Rice or Havertz. And I just thought a little bit of composure in that situation, let the play develop a bit, carry the ball forward and give the defender a decision to make, whether he goes with the ball or with the man. And just little things like that make a difference. But ultimately, we had who we had on the pitch, and it just felt a little bit stodgy. The first half was really bad. And the thing is with this Arsenal team, no matter how we're playing, regardless of how we're playing, we always look strong defensively, which is like our base level now, which is super good. It's really encouraging. So I never really worry about us defensively anymore. But it's not too dissimilar to how we started last season. Just a bit stodgy, a bit stiff. And I think based on what's happened with all of the injuries and everything, we haven't had a chance to find any fluency.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Odegaard observation is one that a lot of people will make, this morning. Clearly, he is our most gifted, most creative player. And there were, I think, certain parallels with the game against Porto away last season, right? In that we found it really, really difficult to create anything, to get into spaces away at Porto. The difference, of course, between the two teams, Porto and Atalanta, Porto do with this kind of Conceição small man syndrome cynicism, relentless cynicism, falling over from free kicks and corners and getting free kicks. And, they're a horrible, horrible team to play against for that reason. Whereas Atalanta are just so organized and so disciplined. They talked about it. I think Arteta talked about it. Rice talked about it on TV afterwards. He said the man-to-man thing, they're like, whoa, what are we supposed to do here? And all you can do is maybe go backwards or pass the ball back and go across. And it is difficult. I think what it requires maybe is an element of risk-taking, if you like. Like, can you burst between the lines? Can you take on a couple of men? Can you find that pass? And this is where I think the Odegaard situation is a little bit interesting, because in the game against Porto at home last season, it was decided by one outstanding moment of creativity from Martin Odegaard. And we got the goal. I think it was Leandro Trossard who got the goal, won the game on a penalty shootout. But that was that one piece of brilliance that you need at this level in Europe to be able to unlock a team like Porto, like Atalanta. And if you don't necessarily have that, or if in the absence of that, you're not as inclined to take a few risks here and there on the pitch, particularly in areas of the pitch where you might get caught out in transition. If you try something in midfield and it breaks down and all of a sudden you're turned back towards your own goal, I don't think, necessarily we had the player to be able to do that in midfield. But also I think they were probably told, don't try that. Let's not lose this game in a stupid way by losing the ball in a ridiculous area of the pitch because you tried to dribble through three players or something like that.
Well, that's what happened at Porto last year. We had a chance to break in the 93rd or the 94th minute. We tried I think it was Martinelli who tried a cross-field ball. It was intercepted. And then they went up the other end and scored. So David Raya made a reference to it in his post-match interview. He said, if we can't win the game, don't lose it. And again, it's just continuing that momentum. A point really isn't the end of the world in this game. But again, kind of what you referenced there, I look at this team and I think we do have a lot of exciting options up front. But whether we have the top level of individual quality to really break these kind of games open, remains to be seen. I thought that was our big downfall last year in this competition, that we just didn't have that top end quality to be able to hurt a team like Porto, hurt a team like Bayern Munich. That last half an hour at the Allianz Arena was kind of sad to watch, really, because we just looked puffed.
Yeah.
And I think, the addition of Sterling, we've got Saka, we've got Jesus, we've got Martinelli, who on paper can all do that. But I just think at this moment in time, the players aren't sharp enough. Some are low on confidence. Some are looking to Sunday. Havertz is playing in midfield. So there's a lot of different circumstances going on that you need to consider. But I certainly agree. There's maybe a lack of individualism in this team at times to really just say, I'm going to take on 3 or 4 players here and whack one into the top corner. And I know players like that are very rare.
Sure.
But sometimes things happen, right?
Yeah.
Or someone twats one in from 30 yards and, I think a lot of our individual brilliance, which I'm sure we'll get onto now, comes in the other side of the pitch with an incredible pair of centre-backs and a goalkeeper that we're just growing to love even more with each passing week.
Yeah, I mean, just on that, I've been, back and forward with my buddy Tony, who was over at the game, and he's like, we need a striker, we need a striker, we need a striker. And I don't disagree necessarily that a striker would be a bad addition by any means, but the other part of me is like, we need maybe just what you've been talking about, that individual quality, that guy who can, roast a man down the side. And I know we see it sometimes with Bukayo Saka, but I think his brilliance is a bit more disciplined, right? If I want to talk about Bukayo Saka, calculated brilliance of Bukayo Saka, rather than the sort of maverick brilliance that we're thinking about right here. And then the question for me is like, does Mikel Arteta want or countenance that kind of maverick behavior in a team like his, where, it's built on structure and the progression has been built on this structure and people playing within the confines of what he wants? I mean, I do think there is more scope for individualism within this team, and that's why this summer, if we, not necessarily bought a striker but brought in a high-level winger, I would have been really, really pleased. So it's games like this maybe that highlight perhaps just what's missing, not quite in terms of the striker, but in the forward line or just behind the forward line. And certainly without Martin Odegaard, we are a little bit bereft of creativity behind the front three. And I think that was evident last night. But as you say, we are growing to love, I love our defenders. David Raya, I think, is by some distance Arsenal's player of the season so far. And I say that knowing it is only 5 games in, but what a huge contribution he has made to the season so far when you think about some of the saves that he made. The save at 1-0 against Wolves, that incredible save against Aston Villa. There's another one I'm forgetting last night, of course, from the penalty spot. So let's get into David Raya and his impact on this. I mean, I have worried out loud and privately about Thomas Partey over the last while. Actually, since he's come back into the team at the end of last season, I've felt like there's something missing physically, that players are able to get by him a little bit too quickly, and I worried that it might cost us. I worried that it might result in, a damaging moment. And I think that was almost the case last night when Ederson sort of breezed past him. Partey grabbed him, then clipped his heels in the box. There was a lengthy VAR check, I think, just to confirm where it happened, not whether what happened was worthy of a penalty or not. Because the minute I saw it, I was like, that's a penalty. Has to be.
Yeah.
No question. I think if that wasn't given up the other end, we'd be going absolutely crazy. So before we get to Raya, I mean, is it another example of where Thomas Partey is really struggling? We don't quite know what that injury took out of him, but it's pretty clear, I think, at this point that there is something missing physically from his game since that long injury absence last season.
This is a really weird situation. I find it difficult to gauge whether Arteta is playing him because he wants to play him or whether he's just kind of waiting for Mourinho to come back and then it will be Rice straight back into the 6 and Mourinho into the 8. I think it might be a mixture of both, but we know that Arteta likes Thomas Partey. And even when he came back last season, Jorginho was effectively made redundant because he didn't feature at all since then. So you have to feel that there is an element of intention behind this. But I think from where I've seen him, I don't think he's physically as low as he has been. Or at times I've really looked at him and thought, oof, he's like the Tin Man. Or you could hear his joints squeaking on the pitch. Literally, you should be ready with some WD-40 on there to go and smoothen things out a bit. But I think he has improved a little bit in terms of his physical condition. But when you're starting from a bar that low, anywhere is going to feel like an improvement. And you just see him, especially in contact. I think 1v1s, he's bypassed too often, too easily, and running back towards his own goal. Again, he hasn't got the legs to do it. And you see why he's dropping in between both of the centre-backs now, because he needs the game entirely and utterly in front of him. There's no confidence in his own body to be able to do that anymore, so that's why he drops. And again, just for the goal, for the penalty, as soon as he was isolated in that area, I just thought, ooh, a little bit worried here, because Ederson's a good player. I mean, he's normally a kind of defensive player, but can play box to box. But even a little bit of skill like that, or a bit of burst to get past him, and you could see him struggling. There was a tug at the shirt, a pull on the shoulder. And then once you get into that clumsy, jostling, bustling territory, all it takes is a little touch and he's going to go down. There was no way that they were not going to give that as a penalty. And even after the VAR check, I agreed. I thought it was more just to understand where the contact took place as opposed to whether if it was a foul or not. Yeah. So we're kind of in a weird spot with him, because the alternatives are not great. I mean, Jorginho, obviously a very capable player, but we get more of the same with him in terms of the lack of physicality. Both good players on the ball. I just think we've been screwed over by the injuries. Honestly, I don't know if Marino was fit, we would be playing with Thomas Partey so consistently and so regularly. But his flaws are clear, I think, when you watch Arsenal, and he's not even bringing the security or the progression on the ball that you would like.
That's the other side of it for me, is that like the problems are, they seem to me to be very basic, very simple things that he isn't doing. And I understand, if you've got a big injury or had a big injury, particularly as you're heading towards the September of your career, he's 30 plus now. I get it. There can be an impact, but you've also got all those years of experience, all those years under your belt of top level football, which can help you offset some of that, where you shouldn't be just giving the ball away. A 5-yard pass should go where it needs to go, not out for a throw in, those kinds of things. And that to me has been the sort of the thing that's exacerbated the physical aspect of the decline I think we're seeing, is that either the decision making isn't right or the concentration isn't right. Those are things that are fully within his control, above and beyond any kind of physical limitation that a player has when they get a bit older and they've had an injury or two. It's about being switched on properly and doing the simple basic things properly. And just too many of those things aren't happening. And that, I think, is that's what sort of makes it stand out, because those were the things that he was really, really good at.
Mm-hmm. There's just some giveaways. There'll be like 2 or 3 a game where you just think, how have you even done that? Under no pressure yesterday, he picked the ball up in and around the centre circle, and there was an easy pass to Timber at left back, and he just put it out of play. It's like, how have you done that? And there'll be like adventurous passes that are just not on, and he'll dink them out, and the defender will just see it out, and the winger's there like, well, what am I supposed to do with that? And it's a big shame, because I think our plans have had to be changed quite dramatically already this year. But there does seem to be this attraction for Partey from Arteta that I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure what it's based on anymore. Whether it's the Partey from 18 months ago, then that's absolutely fine. But what we are having on the pitch at the moment, and what we've got on the pitch at the moment, is not the Partey from 18 months ago. So
no,
I don't know. It's a strange situation, and I think some of it has been forced by what's available. But I don't know. I'm quite surprised we haven't seen more of Jorginho, to be honest. And maybe, what did you make of the substitution? What did you make of Partey coming off?
I wasn't at all surprised. And it's quite unusual for Mikel Arteta to make that kind of a change that early in the game. And I think
there's
that
an eye
was
on Sunday.
Yeah.
So he'll be starting on Sunday.
I mean, that's probably true. But I think we also have to recognise that he has played as well quite a lot of football, since the start of the season, that the lack of options has meant we've had to lean on Partey, and maybe there is an aspect of that to what's going on with him. But, it felt to me, like he's taking him off to protect him, to make sure that he's got enough in his legs for Sunday. But it also felt like, right, you haven't had a good game and I need to get somebody else on this pitch as well. I think the timing of it suggested there was a little bit more than just saving him for Sunday. For me, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that the tactical change was quite interesting when Jorginho came on, because the first few minutes, Rice was completely sat alongside him in more of a double pivot. And then as play progressed, I think Rice ended up being the deeper midfielder, with Jorginho just a bit in front, and Trossard was coming a bit deeper as well to try and influence the game in that side of things. So I think we are trying different things, and it will take us a bit of time to figure out who we need to be without Odegaard. But we need to evolve past this, I would say. And it's not going to happen overnight. We're going to have to try a few different things. But just everything looks a bit stodgy and too much like hard work at the moment, which is not entirely unsurprising. But I'm happy to kind of put these 3 games into one place. It's if it continues against Bolton, if it continues against Leicester, if it continues against Southampton, that's when I'd start to worry. But as we stand, or as things stand, I'm happy to kind of need us to get through these games, and we'll see what happens after that.
Sure. Okay, well, look, the person we should be talking more about, obviously, is David Raya. So during the VAR check, it was quite interesting to see him head over to the sideline to have a word with Iñaki Kanya, who's the goalkeeping coach. Quite what they were talking about, I don't really know. Maybe they have some information on how Retegui takes penalties. Anyway, turns out that was a good conversation to have, because he made an excellent save from the penalty and then a superb save from the rebound. And look, when you look at the replay from behind and you see that Retegui has got all the goal to the right to aim for and heads it sort of back towards Raya, I understand to an extent why people are talking about maybe he didn't do enough on the rebound. But I don't want to take anything away from Raya, because the speed with which he got up, the reflexes, the strong hand to get that ball, as it was basically just going over the line. The Hawkeye thing showed that some of the ball was actually over the line. It is an incredible piece of goalkeeping from a guy who is absolutely, I mean, do you say on fire? I think he's on fire right now. He's been just so good. I don't really care to go into the ins and outs of it. I think Rio Ferdinand, someone you might expect to ask a really dumb question, asked a really dumb question last night about whether, Ramsdale going means that Raya has felt, more secure, which, I just think is absurd. I don't think it's got anything to do with how well David Raya is playing. But there's no question that he has won a lot of people over, and there's no question that so far this season, the fact that Arsenal haven't lost a game is in no small part down to some of the interventions and saves that he has made.
Yeah, it was absolutely brilliant. And I don't know if Ramsdale leaving will have had any effect on his performances, but I think there is a comfort in more security and certainty, and he's not on loan David Raya anymore. He is Arsenal number 1, David Raya. And I think having a chance to build those relationships with his back four and the team in general, he's understanding his role a bit more. There's no doubt he's had to step up from what he was needing to do at Brentford and asked to do at Brentford. And yeah, he just knows that he's the man now, right? So there's a confidence in him from the manager and the staff and the back four that makes him feel good. And that is just an incredible piece of goalkeeping brilliance. I mean, I had a feeling that there was a potential for him to save the penalty. I think he looks quite confident now, and he is single-handedly changing my prejudice against short goalkeepers and my discrimination, which was scarred by David Ospina mostly, who was too busy spending half of the game behind his goal line. But anyway, that probably would have been useful for the penalties now, seeing as you have to be behind the line. But yeah, I always have a feeling that he'll be able to save penalties now, but the way and the speed at which he got back up and was able to launch himself over, there was some people have compared it to the double save earlier this season against Aston Villa. Other people drew comparisons to David Seaman. For me, all I saw was Wojciech Szczesny there at Anfield.
Oh, yeah.
That double save from Dirk Kuyt, the stumble across to get back up and find your feet again and to launch yourself at it. It was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And again, in a moment where we needed him. We needed him there. I think Villa was 0-0 when he made that save. Mm-hmm. We were 1-0 up against Wolves, so that would have pegged us back when he made the brilliant save there. This kind of kept us in this game, because when you go 1-0 down in Europe, things can get very messy very quickly. And that was just what we needed at that moment. And he has absolutely been the measure of consistency with a little sprinkle of game winning or game changing ability. And he's been brilliant. And it's not just the saves, it's been his overall game, his calm and composure in possession. I love the way he's able to come and claim the ball so consistently. He's been brilliant. And he is firmly Arsenal's number one now. And he's been a huge addition to what we've been able to do already this season. Yeah.
I think there is a direct correlation between the loudness of the clapping on the line as you're about to face a penalty and your ability to save it. Those were some very loud claps from David Raya. Thumps. Yeah. I enjoyed Gasparini saying he's a cat. Just put me in mind of Gasparini as a kind of jazz musician going, this cat's a cat, man.
He could be a jazz musician. He's got that kind of wise vibe.
Yeah.
He's a character, actually, a really underrated manager.
Well, look what he's doing. This is, as we said, a very good Atalanta team. The other thing I suppose that we should just mention with Raya, I looked up the stats this morning, put them on the blog I did about the game. In his entire career across the Championship and the Premier League, before he came to Arsenal, he saved 1 of 20 penalties. Since he's come to Arsenal, he saved 1 in the Premier League, 1 in the Champions League, and a couple in the shootout against Porto. So it's quite interesting to see a player add another string to their bow at a relatively late stage in their career. Like, I know he's only 29, which is still very young for a goalkeeper, but when you go through most of your career, like, some goalkeepers are just outstanding penalty savers. They can't catch a ball for shit. They couldn't come for a cross to save their lives, but put them in front of a penalty and they're like, whoa, they just have this preternatural ability to do it. Whereas some goalkeepers are much more all-rounders. Raya's record from penalties, I mean, we've had goalkeepers in the past. I don't think Ramsdale was particularly brilliant with penalties. Remember Petr Cech? When is he ever going to save a penalty?
Oh, man, Petr
for me,
Cech. No.
To be fair, I'm not a fan of Petr Cech. I didn't enjoy his time at Arsenal, but my main bone of contention then was like, maybe we should stop giving penalties away rather than blaming the goalkeeper for not saving them. But that's just me. But this aspect of Raya's development and his career is quite interesting.
Yeah, completely. I think if Petr Cech ended up diving the right way, it still would have gone the other way during his Arsenal career. So that was, the less said about that, the better. But I think saving penalties is an art. And once you save a couple, I think you start to feel yourself a bit more, and there's a psychological impact where you yourself feel bigger in the goal, but also to the penalty taker.
Yeah, you have an aura. You've got a bit of an aura, exactly.
Exactly. Yeah. You've got like a feeling and an aura in the goal that makes players maybe think twice. They change their mind as they go to strike it. To be fair, I don't think the initial strike is great from Retegui. I mean, obviously he strikes it reasonably well, but it's not super hard. It's not really in the corner. For me, what is so impressive about this double save is the reaction and the sort of the strength to get up there and save the second header. Mm-hmm. So it's really, really good. And it just typifies him and his form at the moment, because as I said, this Arsenal team, even when they're not playing well, there is a baseline level of compactness, organization, defensive strength and quality. And he is absolutely a part of that. So it just makes you a much harder team to beat. And so often in the past, Arsenal have been so weak and spineless defensively, so easy to knock off their stride, to crumble. And I don't get those vibes at all at the moment. Even when Atalanta were pushing a little bit, I'm not going to say they were putting waves of pressure or sustaining waves of pressure towards the end, but there were some crosses, some free kicks. Lookman forced a couple of dangerous situations, but there was an amazing tackle from Saliba close to the goal. There was a couple of big interventions, aerial interventions from Gabriel. We're just like a solid team now. So I don't worry about us defensively anymore, but now I'm looking for us to evolve beyond what we need to do without Martin Odegaard, which is mostly my area of concern now.
Yeah, so look, he did try a couple of things which I think are worth talking about. When he took Partey off for Jorginho, he also put on Trossard for Jesus, and I think Gabriel Jesus had a poor game. He was pretty peripheral. The ball didn't stick to him. The things he did try didn't really come off. So I understood that change as well from simply a match perspective. You're not playing well. I need to give somebody else a go. But what was interesting about this was Trossard sort of played as like a deep line playmaker kind of guy, more than a forward, as we saw in the Spurs game. He was sitting a little bit deeper and he was trying to make passes from deep to try perhaps and exploit the fact that Atalanta do press man-to-man, and if you can get a few balls between the lines, maybe you can cause them some problems. I don't think it really worked. He didn't really find the passes that he needed to find, but I thought that was a noteworthy experiment from Arteta in the context of the game that we were seeing before us.
Yeah, I mean, you have to try stuff. Especially now when we're figuring things out, looking for inspiration heading into the next few weeks. I had no issue with him coming on and doing that. What I felt the issue is that I can understand the theory of him coming deep, but in the end, I just think it congested things a bit more in the center of the pitch. And I know it pushed Havertz on a little bit more. And I know theoretically that should also push Martinelli and Saka on a bit more, and later Sterling. But it just didn't really work. We didn't, throughout the whole game, and Arteta made a reference to this, we just didn't do enough on the ball. We were too loose, too sloppy. The basics were not being done right. Again, passes being overhit. And ultimately, if you can't sort out your basics in attacking areas, then how do you expect to score any goals? Yeah. So it was just a loose, stodgy performance from Arsenal. And no matter what they tried, there was Jesus up front. Havertz went up front for a bit. Sterling played wide. Martinelli played wide. Saka. We tried a whole different bunch of options. We tried to go with a two in midfield. We put Rice deeper. It was just one of those nights. And I think we got through it. We needed to get through it, and we got through it. But yeah, I think Arteta said it there. The issue is not how we play defensively. It's more of what we did on the ball. And too much of that was not at the required standard. I mean,
the big chance that we had in the second half, for all the talk of attacking brilliance and creativity, it was essentially Route 1 football. David Raya booted it. Kai Havertz held it up really, really well, was very strong with his back to goal, played it off to Raheem Sterling. Raheem Sterling played a nice pass into a very good run by Gabriel Martinelli, who was, I think, in a position where you would I'm not going to say you would back him to score, but when you see a forward go through there, you're going, this is a goal. This should be a goal. And in a tight game, that's the moment that can win you the game. That's the moment between 0-0 and 1-0. And it's quite a different discussion maybe today about, where we are, what we're going, what we're doing, how we cope without this player, that player, or whatever. It's a bad miss, I think, from Gabriel Martinelli. I, wrote about him after the Spurs game. I think he was instrumental in ensuring that we, defended well enough to win that game. I think the effort he and everybody else in that game put in was outstanding defensively. But we have to go back to March for his last goal. And it's not as if he hasn't had opportunities. It's not as if he hasn't had chances. Whatever is going on, the lack of composure, the lack of conviction in the finish, it feels like week by week by week, this is becoming more of a talking point, which, I'm sure he won't worry too much about, because I'm sure he's not on social media listening to people talk about what he's doing or not doing in front of goal. But I do think it might become a little bit of a burden. The longer it goes on, the more it becomes like a psychological thing for him, where he's in front of goal. Instinctively, if he's confident and on a good goal scoring run, I think he just tucks that into the bottom corner. Instead, he went for power. He went to blast it into the top corner, put it over the bar, and it's a bad miss. And you can understand why people are talking about him, and maybe talking about him with a measure of concern when it comes to what he's doing in front of goal. The end product, the final ball, the finish, it's just not there.
It's not. And I think you can see that it's weighing on him, to be honest, because whatever you think about Martinelli, the footballer, there has often been a clinical nature in front of goal. I think he's always been very secure in front of goal. There's always a feeling that he's in the right places at the right time, especially when he first broke through. There was a variety of goals being scored in the air, running from outside to in. There were left-footed shots from the edge of the area, but he just seems to be a shadow of what we know he can be at the moment, and it's perfectly understandable for that to be weighing on him. It's a long time since his last goal, as you mentioned. I think it was in the 6-0 win at Sheffield United. And the first chance I can take or leave. That's a congested penalty area. He's leaning back. That's fine. I would like him to do better there, but I can let it go. The second one for me is disappointing. I think the ball is weighted nicely from Sterling. He can take the ball in his stride from his run. There's nobody putting him under pressure. Yes, he's maybe taken slightly wide, but I would expect a shot on target there at minimum. Yeah. And his mechanics were all wrong in the lead up to the shot. He's hunched over. First of all, he doesn't look at the goal once. And then as he strikes the ball, he leans back. What happens when you lean back? The ball flies over. So there's just an element of him snatching things, rushing things. There's not that chance to take a breath in front of goal anymore. And it is worrying. It is worrying because even his overall play is not clean enough or good enough to be able to miss chances like that. And it is concerning because what I loved about Martinelli during his, obviously that 15 goal season, was the regularity and consistency he found himself close to goal. There'd be 2 or 3 or 4 occasions every game where he was in the 6-yard box or in the penalty area taking shots. Now he spends half the time on the touchline. And I don't think he's good enough to beat players 1v1 in terms of his skill or his technical quality or security is not amazing. Let
me ask you though, just to sort of in mitigation, play devil's advocate, if he's spending a lot of time on the touchline, is that by choice or is that by instruction?
I can't imagine that would be by instruction. I think some of it will be, yes, but I think the way we play now, especially with Havertz and Jesus and Trossard, is these kind of false nines. Maybe Havertz not so much anymore, but you need your wingers to come in and contribute, And I just feel Martinelli is being, what's the word, capped, maybe, in those areas, because I don't think he has the feet or the quality to be able to beat players. It's more about his movement and being able to exploit space in behind. And I don't think he's getting into any of those situations regularly enough. You know, and even when he is, he's not finishing well enough either. So it is concerning. I would be lying if I said it wasn't a concern. But then we've played Trossard from the start and he hasn't looked amazing. We've obviously got Sterling now, but he needs time to get up to speed. So again, we're juggling different players, different profiles, different options. And in theory, on paper, Martinelli is our best one, but the execution of what he's offering is not the best one at the moment. So it is concerning. I think the second one he should have buried.
Oh, I think so too.
That should have been buried. And it was worrying to see how far away the eventual finish was from the goal.
I would have more concerns over the finishing than the other aspects of his game that you mentioned, because, you know, in a tight game yesterday, he was the one who made the run. He was the one who came in from the inside. He was the one who found the space for that shot. It's about the shot. It's about the finish. It's about the end product. I do take your point, but I think really he just badly needs a goal to open things up again. But there will come a point where if you don't score, you know, you don't start games or you don't get in the team. And I think it is a tricky one for Arteta, because he does bring a lot to the team, particularly when I think about going to Manchester City on Sunday, when I think about how much we might have to defend and how disciplined and dogged and switched on he is defensively pretty much at all times, then, you know, I can see why he could start that game easily. But if you're looking for the confidence in a player to deliver a big goal in a big moment, I mean, he did score the goal that beat Manchester City at home last season, so it would be very, very nice for him to, you know, get himself back on track again with something similar at the Etihad on Sunday. But, you know, I do share concerns. I think it's gone too long now for it to be... Look, players can go through little blips, and forwards can go periods without scoring. Declan Rice said afterwards he's doing a lot of work with the attacking coaches. You know, he's sure it'll come for him sooner rather than later. But it is, you know, it's hard not to be concerned about that. You know, when we have other issues to deal with, the lack of creativity, the absence of Martin Odegaard, those kinds of things, you know, even going back to the midfield discussion that we had, you've got to have players who can make up for that shortfall by taking their chances when they come.
Yeah, I think what will happen now is mostly a timeshare kind of situation between Martinelli, Trossard and Sterling. I think it will be taken on a game-by-game basis. There'll be different games that suit different players. And for me, it will be a much more kind of short-term view on things. Some games will be a Martinelli game. Some games will be a Trossard game. Others will be a Sterling game. And until one of those players can really nail down a position, it will just be a mixture between the three. Yeah. So that's not ideal. And I quite like that we have options to try different things, but the longer it goes on, like you said, the more it becomes a thing. And that's the last thing you want in football, is for something to become a thing. And I think quietly this is becoming the similar situation for Gabriel Jesus as well, who, as we mentioned earlier, did not have the best performance either yesterday. So we need some players to
step up,
to kind of step up. Yeah, step up. We need them now, especially with Odegaard missing. It's your time, guys. We need you, and you're here for a reason. And we know that you're all good players, so it's time for you guys to show what you can do.
All right, well, look, we got nearly an hour out of a fairly boring 0-0 draw with Atalanta, so fuck knows how long we would have gone if that game had had anything interesting happening in it. But, you know, that's football for you, and obviously we have to put this defeat, but put this result to one side and concentrate on a big game on Sunday against Manchester City. So, look, we'll leave it there for now. Phil, as ever, thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I just ask, would you have taken the point before? If someone offered you a point before, would you have taken it?
That's a really interesting question. I mean, I suppose no, because I always think these days I always think we're capable of winning games because of more to do with the defensive platform and stability that we have rather than the firepower. But no, I don't think I would have. I think I looked at this as an away game against a very good team. I didn't take Atalanta for granted whatsoever. I saw what they did last season to Liverpool, for example. I saw what they did to Bayer Leverkusen in the Europa League final. So I didn't go there, or I didn't have any sort of, I wasn't under any illusions that this was going to be an easy game or that this is a game that Arsenal, they should win that easily. They should win that. But I think we were probably capable of doing more on the ball, so I wouldn't have taken a point. In the context of the game itself and how we played, I suppose it's fine, but like I said at the start, I've got no real frame of reference for whether this is going to be a valuable point or 2 points dropped when we look at this, 58-team league or whatever the fuck it is that we're in, What about you?
Yeah, I think I would have taken a point. I saw this one as an inconvenience, basically, to the games it was sandwiched between in terms of Spurs away and City away, and I was under no illusions that Atalanta are very strong at home. So I think I will absolutely take the point. It was the second of 3 horrible away games in a week, and this was about getting everybody back, getting some minutes into people, resting some people, taking what you can back to London, and hopefully David Raya had a nice cold beer on the way back. So I think he earned it. And that was, for me, the important thing. It was mostly to reserve something with an eye on Sunday. Yeah. So as much as I didn't like the performance, a point in isolation is not the worst result.
No, I guess not. And hopefully it was an Estrella 0 or whatever it was, because, we don't want David Raya impacted in any way before Sunday, because he could be a busy, busy boy. All right, look, we'll leave it there now for sure. Phil, as ever, thanks very much.
My pleasure. Chat to you soon.
Thank you very much indeed to Phil, and you can hear more from him next week over on Patreon as we do our weekly Premier League Roundup podcast called The 30. Now, also on Patreon, we will be looking ahead to our very important, very difficult, very challenging game against Manchester City on Sunday. Normally the preview podcast comes out on a Friday, but because we played last night, because this podcast is just going out, we're going to have that for you on Saturday. Myself and Lewis will have our Man City preview podcast over on Patreon tomorrow, probably out mid-morning there or thereabouts. So if you'd like to get on board and you'd like to get instant access to everything that we do on Patreon, it is patreon.com/Arseblog. Just $6 a month. In a world where everything gets more and more and more expensive, our prices have not changed since we launched Patreon back in 2018. So if you want to support everything that we do on Arseblog, as well as getting lots of exclusive content, patreon.com/Arseblog for just $6 a month. Right, I'm going to leave it there. Get this podcast out to all of you. Hope you enjoyed the show. Thank you so much as always for being here. Like I said, preview podcast tomorrow. You can join myself and James on Monday for an Arsecast Extra. In the meantime, take it easy. Have a great weekend for all the obvious reasons, and we will catch you on the next one. Until then, cheers. Bye-bye.